All the major social media platforms have been awash with positive comments about Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari's courage and good judgment in finally signing off on a new set of electoral guidelines, which is expected to restore sanity and a bit more credibility to the country's electoral processes. Some say it couldn't have come at a more opportune time, what with the fast-approaching general election. Now, young Nigerians, many of whom are on social media, appear to be becoming increasingly aware of their civic obligations regarding the forthcoming elections. But what must they do from now to seize full advantage of the new electoral law? Well, joining us now to have a chat on this is Seun Awogbenle, who is a youth advocate and a policy and communications professional. Welcome to the morning show. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. You're welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Well, when we first talk about the timing of the president's signing of this electoral amendment, many people thought that perhaps he wouldn't have signed it this year, but he did. And when you look at the timing of it, do you think that it's happening at a good time, or do you think it could have come sooner? What are your thoughts in terms of the timing, first and foremost?
Thank you once again for having me. I do think it could have actually come earlier. You recall that within the last 5 years, the president has actually declined access to the Electoral Amendment Bill on 5 different occasions. First in March 2018, the second in July 2018, the third in September 2018, the fourth in December 2018, and lastly in December 2021. For obvious reasons, like, as simple as drafting errors, But, now we have it, and we need to begin to look into the future with possibilities and hope of what it will bring for us. For example, there are a number of critical amendments that have actually been captured in the new Electoral Act 2020 that actually present great prospect for Nigeria's democracy. You're talking about early notice of elections, which you saw INEC did yesterday, not later than 360 days before the election. We're also talking about early release of funds, not later than 360 days before the election. We're really looking forward to that, and we hope that the National Assembly would expeditiously consider the budget of INEC. You're also talking about the early conduct of primaries, not later than 180 days. And that is why, for the first time in Nigeria's history, you're going to be having political parties conduct their primaries and concluded by June this year. You're also going to be having the early commencement of campaigns, which would commence at least 150 days before the election. And we're seeing that the presidential campaign is actually going to start by September, unusually. So, most of the, and don't also forget that this also gives inclusion for persons with disabilities, which is also a very critical amendment. You're also talking about, how it has also deepened the use of technology, both for accreditation and, and transmission as well. So we're really looking forward to an exciting time in Nigeria's democratic history. That was why most of us were really, really passionate about this issue. For over 3 years, I've worked with a coalition of civil society groups that have ensured that we've actually been, we have had to put pressure, most importantly, on the National Assembly to ensure that some of these amendments are captured. And, today, we feel very excited. It's actually victory after so much struggle. But it could have come sooner, but now that it has finally come, we're then looking at the next phase for this, for the amendment.
All right, Seun. Just like you said, you were part of the coalition of NGOs that worked. Was it Yaga Africa?
Yeah,
right.
Under the Fixed Elections NG campaign.
Exactly. Two things. One, from your own view, what's the deal for the Nigerian youth in this amendment bill? And secondly, give us an insight into the suggestions, the contributions that the coalition of the NGOs, made into this amendment bill that has now become, a law, an act. I'm asking that so that we have an idea of what we are celebrating beyond the fact that, yes, announcements will come early, INEC will have access to money early, campaigns will start 150 days to election. But then what is the deal? Is that all? Is that all we are celebrating?
No, the most important deal for us as young people and as civil society is actually the electronic transmission of results, right? And that was like the major, I wrote extensively on it, on why it was really important for us to make this first step. Because eventually we're talking about a foundation for the eventual electronic voting, right? But we're still going to have the paper ballot. But we actually are looking forward to how it's actually going to work. You saw what happened in Edo. You saw what happened in Ondo. In the last 2 times, the last 2-3 times where INEC has actually, tried to, practice the use of electronic voting, there's actually inspired, confidence in the electoral process. So we are really confident of what this is actually going to bring up. And you see, for a very long time, a lot of people have actually lost faith in Nigeria's electoral process. People feel that votes are counted, but they actually do not count. But we're beginning to look at, the possibility of people beginning to see that their votes can count. From the mathematical impossibility in Imo, to the underage voting in Kano, and the violence in Kogi. The electronic transmission of results will actually check all of that, because you don't have to get to, the ward or, before most of the results will be documented. You saw what happened in Edo. We all could follow. By the morning of the day after the election, we could easily predict the winner of the election. And that's the kind of confidence you want to give people as you go into elections, because you're talking about a credibility deficit for a very long time. You're also talking about a legitimacy crisis that's continuing to beset our electoral process. So when you want people to get involved, you must talk about accountability, and this is what's going to bring about. So for me, as a young person, and for a lot of young people who are also, people don't just want to go and stand in the sun, and eventually their votes will not count. So you are talking about a process, a time when, like they'll say, such a time to be alive, where our votes will then begin to count. But this is not the end of the struggle. The struggle continues, as they say.
Well, I like that you've said that the main thing is the electronic transmission of result. According to INEC, half of all voters, at least 51%, are between the ages of 18 and 35, youth, population like you. As a youth advocate, what are you doing to push your numbers so that we can have more voters select a credible candidate?
Okay, so in 2019, United Nations Population Fund said that Nigeria's population grew progressively from 54 million in 1969 to 201 million in 2019. According to demography tracker Statista, it says about half of Nigeria's population are under the age of 19. That's Nigeria's median age is 18.4. Those who are under 35 are actually 76% of this population, right? So we are talking about a big number, so more than 1/3 of this population, more of this country's population can actually decide, the outcome of the election. So you asked about what young people can do to actually galvanize the numbers. So the first thing is to register to vote. So ultimately, I think what we have all come to, because I'm a pragmatic, I tell people, what we have all come to agree is that we can actually unfold a new system from the current one and reinvent the wheel, right? We do not necessarily have to dispense with it, because you need the institutional memory, but this process can actually be better. And that's why, so a lot of people, actually believe that the best way to actually bring sustainable change, sustainable change can come from, from whatever people talk about, revolution, people talk about, but the best way to actually institute sustainable change is via the ballot, right? So you are talking about the power of the ballot to progressively bring about change. So it is still going to be about the ballot, but you need options that can actually lift the spirit of the people. And that's one thing that we haven't had for a long time, right? You actually need quality options on the ballot that can actually inspire confidence in the people and say, I'm excited about the quality of the options. I think that's also where the conversation will start from, about the quality of the options that the political parties will then begin to. And that's why I have a big problem with what you call the money politics that's completely dominated this, the political scene in Nigeria. You cannot talk about the politics of ideas where money continues to dominate. But it speaks to a deeper problem anyway, right? It speaks to a deeper problem of poverty. And when we say, poverty is actually, it's a conspiracy, but you can actually say that for a long time, poverty has also been weaponized because you want to keep, the people's political value aground for every 4 years. So you can afford them, So it was 500, some years ago. You still want to keep it at 1,000 naira. So you're talking about a politics that does not have, but it also speaks about what kind of, approach to actually reducing poverty. Sustainably, to reduce poverty, you have to invest in human capital development, which includes education, health, and access to economic opportunities. But government will not do that. Government will give you 5,000 naira. But 5,000 naira would never solve poverty sustainably. So the problem, the point is that all of these things are actually intertwined. You might not be able to isolate them completely. But if we are going to eventually be able to talk about politics of ideas that actually give young people opportunities, then we have to talk about how that, you would have actually been able to reduce poverty to the barest minimum, so that, people will not have to, you will not have an hungry stomach having to pick between bread and book. So when you ask an hungry stomach to pick between bread and book, I'm going to bread over book any day, right? So the problem, in the long term, what we have to actually solve this problem of poverty. More than 80 million of this country's population are in poverty, and that's a big deal, because you have, I say something every time. I say it is very, very dangerous to have the bulk of this population on what you call survival mode. People literally live on survival every day. People are waking up just to survive. It's a very dangerous place to have our people. Our people should live for much more than survival. People should live for hope. They should live for possibilities. They should live for opportunities. They should live for potential. But the country does not actually provide a lot of opportunities for potential. So you are talking about a failing health system. You are talking about a broken education. You're talking about lack of economic opportunities. You're talking about unemployment. You're talking about, an economy that is almost in shambles. So these are the real problems. And so that's why I'm saying, ultimately, it has to be about leadership, and it has to start with the political parties, the kind of options that we actually get from the political parties. That's why we're asking, within the political parties, can we begin to have what you can call debate? Can political parties begin to debate ideas and not really about, who has more money or who can afford to? So the point really is that, that reminds me, we also should actually emphasize, people going into public service truly for service, because you have a point in which, even before you even become a president or before you become a governor, you're spending, the electoral, one of the flaws that I actually see in this electoral act is why it has raised spending limits, in this electoral. So to become a president, you can spend as high as 15 billion. So when you are spending 15 billion to become president, you are a political merchant. That's political enterprise. It's no longer about service. So I'm actually saying that how can we actually reduce, the cost? But it is also that, but that's actually the reality. And that's why I say there's a nexus between poverty and, the cost of election in Nigeria. And we have to look at that.
When we look at voter apathy, for example, I'd imagine that you being of a certain age and you being, of course, legally allowed to vote, I'd imagine that you yourself, you definitely see the point of voting, but many people within your age bracket may not, especially with the many issues that you just raised in your last answer there. So when we look at the change in the electoral amendments and the fact that in terms of the electronic transmission, it provides an alternative to what you said was a credibility deficit earlier. On the other hand, though, there's still the issue of candidates and whether or not people who are going to be confident in the process of voting still might not see any confidence in the people that they are given to choose to vote for. So as a youth representative, what do you think needs to be done to make sure that voter apathy is tackled by not just the electronic transmission changes, but also the fact that there are viable candidates that youth feel empowered enough to get up and vote for?
Okay, thank you. So in 2011, about 53% of the registered voters actually turned out to vote. In 2015, we experienced a decline to about 43%. And in 2019, we had about 35%. That shows an established pattern. It's an increasing loss of confidence in the electoral process. So it is on the day of election that you see young people playing football by the side, because they do just feel like their votes would never count. But that is actually a very depressing place to find your population. People should be excited about the quality of the options. But see, one, very important point that we all continue to miss in the electoral, process is that the parties themselves are the most important, aspects in all of this, right? They are very, very vital to not just survival of the democracy, but also the outcome of the election. Because don't also forget that you can only vote for the quality, for the options that you actually have on the ballot, which are largely determined by the political parties. So I think that for a lot of young people, what I'd say is that So we need to do away with this idea of, complete idealism and just face it. Barack Obama talked about the dangers of purity politics. Today you have, majorly the APC, the PDP, and others, right? Can young people actually go into these political parties with their numbers and see how, you can take back the system, through most of them? It is possible, you can see it in Lagos, you can see it in everywhere. It is actually possible to be able to go into to occupy. I mean, like I think it was Chidi Amuta that said something about time to occupy the political parties. We cannot leave the political parties to their own. Young people should go and, go into the political parties and become an important part of the process, because that is where the options will come out from. So when we actually begin to focus on the options right from within the political party and not leave it till after the primaries, now is the time to actually determine who comes out of the kind of options that you have, which can then eventually inspire collective confidence, right? So for me, the political parties themselves, we must occupy the political parties, like Chidi Amuta said.
Yeah, I like that, because it makes a lot of sense. You can't change anything at the polls if you were not part of the processes that, that produce the candidate.
Yes.
You are left with the candidate.
Absolutely.
You said that you are a pragmatist. I like that.
Yes.
Be realistic about what is possible.
Yes.
So I'm asking you, with the strength of the youth population, which one will be better to move en masse into major political parties in the hope that they will always be the big ones anyway? So, we are closer to power, through those parties.
Yeah.
Or you form a political party, like the youth, party, what's it called, YPP or something?
There's YPP, there's youth party as well.
Exactly. And then prove that a party of the youth can actually thrive, so that the numbers are not just, in the statistics. Because the danger in the first option, from a pragmatist point of view,
right,
is that the money bags, the owners of the party, the bullion vans owners, will remind you that you can't just come and hijack our party. We will accommodate you.
Yes.
We will give you certain posts and positions.
Yes.
But then we are not going to hand over the party to you.
Yeah.
If you are that influential and that big, go and form your party and defeat us at the polls. How do you think that the youth, will begin to tackle that? Especially given what the two major aspirants have said lately.
Yes.
One, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu in Oyo, when he went to Grady Alaafin, and the youths were, outside and they were shouting. He said it jocularly, but he was very clear about it, that yes, you all will grow to be president, etc., but you'll be president after me, that I'm going for first. Juxtapose that with what Atiku said in Abeokuta yesterday, when he was asked, are you going to pick, are you going to contest? He says, well, we'll let you know. Do you think that you'll be able to pick the ticket if you do? And he answers, have I ever lost the ticket, anytime that I choose to? Then I asked him, what about the youth who are clamoring for a change, for a true change? And guess what he said? I'm sure you listened to it.
Yes.
So let them compete. It's a democracy. Run against us, compete with us. These are the two biggest names in the horizon at the moment. And they are saying, come and compete with us. Come and compete with our war chest. Come and compete with the parties that we formed. How will the youth fare in that kind of reality? As a pragmatist, let me know, what do you think?
Okay, so I already had my reaction to article on Twitter. I mean, then I wouldn't want to dwell on that.
On which one?
But on article, I did personally felt.
You're more than welcome to. Don't feel.
I did actually feel, that was, careless arrogance. I'm sorry, careless arrogance. But let me talk about, the question, which is that it has never. I keep saying this, even in my book, The Urgency of Now, I've said it has never been about a we versus them. It is never going to be a we versus them, right? It should, first of all, be about intergenerational cooperation It should always be about, because we all have our roles to play. As much as you're talking about the energy and the dynamics of young people, you're also talking about the wisdom and the sage of the old people. You know, and that's the only way you can build a nation. You can't build a nation only on youth energy. You know, you also need the young, you know, the whole people coming. So we need the cooperation, and I think that's what, you know, the whole older folks should actually understand. That we are not saying, you know, that we are unseating them completely. We are only saying there's an established pattern of youth exclusion, and democracy. The way democracy is that, you know, there's a majority rule in democracy that the people who are largely represented, who form the largest number, should be largely represented. And we're talking about this representation not just in terms of, you know, in terms of politics or appointment or, you know, election. We're also talking about it in terms of government's priorities. You know, does government priorities currently reflect what the young people need? Does it actually reflect the needs of, you know, priorities of education? Does it reflect health? Does it reflect access to economic opportunities? So these are the real issues. It has never really been about we versus them. We're asking that the political environment should actually reflect our diversity. In this country today, the average age of ministers is 61. And I just said that about 76% of this population are under the age of 35. More than about half of this population are under the age of 19. How do you reconcile that? The average age of governors is about, you know, 57, thereabout. You know?
Well, I guess
so
in
that's
essence,
a problem.
real quick, because we have very little time, Steve's question, will the youth field the APC, the PDP, or maybe join a third first, like maybe the Agbakuba or Buba Galadima's faction,
or create
your own third force? What would that be in your advocacy?
No, young people who are free to exercise their rights in any of these political parties. I should, you know, be about conviction first. I may not be able to tell, but my point is that in whatever capacity, young people, you know, have a right to be a part of the process, and that's just what we're asking for. Give young people greater chance and opportunity to serve.
All right, Shield. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.